Are we ready? Let's call the November meeting of the Hudson River Regulating District to order. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Got my best side. Roll call, Mr. Farrar, please.
David Bergstraw.
Here.
Albert Hayes.
Here.
Mark Fenton.
Here.
Thomas Stover.
Here.
Michael Clark. Here. Robert Leslie. Here. Robert Fulton.
Here.
John Hudson. Here. Richard Farrar. Here. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right, I need a motion. Is there any questions, revisions, or changes to today's agenda? I have none. Sorry, just need a motion to adopt the meeting agenda for today.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Pinkham.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So moved. Thank you. No guests? Mr. Smale, you'd like to speak? I'm not. Oh, I'm sorry. No. My mistake. No guests? No speakers? No one likes to speak? Thank you. All right. Any questions, revisions, or changes to the board minutes from the October 8th meeting?
I have none.
I didn't see anything.
No.
So I needed a motion to approve
So moved.
those. I have a motion.
Second.
Mr. Hayes, Mr. Finkel.
Mr. Hayes, Mr. Finkel.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We've sailed through that. All right. Report of the Executive Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report is on page 13 in the board package. A few things to report. Attended a couple of events over the last month or so. Local community groups around the Great Saginaw Lake, Great Saginaw Lake Association dinner meeting back in early October, and also follow-on meeting, not follow-on meeting, separate meeting for the Great Saginaw Lake Advisory Council. I have to think of the name. On the 18th of October, essentially they were discussing who was going to chair the new group since Bob Minacchio had retired from as chair of that organization, and they were discussing how they were going to allocate funds for the coming year. There were no decisions made.
Okay.
Also, want to mention to the board that management is currently in mediation, mediated discussions with the CSEA. And the only other thing I want to point out, and we'll get to it later in the agenda, but of note today in particular, have discussion and a draft or a proposal for a resolution to settle the Albany engineering matter. And there's more discussion to be had at that point. I think our general counsel has a greater detail than I'm going to give right now. But any questions?
I have none.
How far out is the contract with CSEA? How long has it been?
Well, it is, you're asking where are we in terms of, it's been expired since
Yeah, that's what I was curious.
June 30th of last year.
Okay.
Traditionally and historically, it has always fallen right in step with the regulating district's budgets. So we're a year and a half into our budget cycle.
Right.
So we're a year and a half into, essentially, they've been working off the contract from
From the old contract.
the old contract that expired a year and a half ago.
Right. Okay. Any movement from appointments?
We talk to the chamber on a regular basis, and I have, apparently there is movement. I don't know when. I don't,
Okay.
when we're going to, and they don't seem to be able to tell me either, and yet they're optimistic that we will have new board members at some point.
Keep asking. Please.
It's our standing request.
Yeah, we've been lucky so far. They get 4 board members every month. Anything else of importance out of the second floor?
No, that's it at this point.
Nothing of note. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
No.
No? All right, I guess we'll go through the contracts. Who wants to explain the Third Amendment to contract C-032-007 with GEI?
I will do that, Mr. Chairman. Yes,
Thanks.
Mr. Fulton's assistance. And this is a back-to-back document.
Oh, we printed on both
I get my
sides?
hands to work here.
Oh, good. We save paper by printing on both
We
sides?
save paper.
Wow.
Excuse me.
Thank you.
So to refresh the board's memory, at the September meeting, because this sounds like this is something we've already voted and approved, and the board had resolved to extend this contract that was about to expire back in September. Following that, the contract and resolution, board-approved resolution, was sent to the Attorney General. Attorney General reviewed and approved it, was then packaged up and sent to the Office of the State Controller. Upon their review, there was, from the original September resolution, there was a whereas, and typically, our resolutions will just recite the history of the contract. And one of the things that they looked at was whereas the board had approved additional $96,000 for additional work to be performed by GEI consultants, and at that point, it increased the total not to exceed to $247,500.
Okay.
That's what we did. But at the time, which was back in 2010, I believe, when the board approved that $96,000, they also, not in the resolution, said, we don't have funding. So we're really going to postpone that. And the fact that we really never encumbered that money at the time, OSC said you can't, they wouldn't accept the resolution that had money on there that hadn't previously been encumbered. So they're looking at their history and they're going, we never saw a contract to include the $96,000. So I just asked them, how do we handle that?
Okay.
They said, redo the resolution, do your extension, but include this time around the encumbering of the $96,000. Once we agreed, myself and OSC, that that was the way to handle it, I then asked Mr. Fulton to ask GEI if they would honor the previously, $96,000 to do the additional work, and they have said that they will honor that not to exceed. And now we have the resolution before us. So this one is going to encumber the $96,000 and extend the resolution, and also rescind the 2 previous resolutions.
So
The one that extended it from September.
let me get it right.
Yeah.
We're rescinding a resolution and then approving the same resolution?
Well,
Do I have it
we're
right?
rescinding 2 resolutions that had 2 separate actions.
I just want to know how
Yeah.
ridiculous.
One added money that we never encumbered, the other one extended the agreement. We're now rescinding them and doing it all on one resolution.
Got it.
And at the end of the day,
Nothing
this is
changed.
the way OSC wants it, and I certainly didn't see any real issue in it, and
I don't.
if encumbering was an issue with them, then, now it did delay, we could have got this, probably going to lose another month in the process, but. So the board has a resolution now that basically does exactly what the September resolution does. encumbers the $96,000, extends the contract out.
Got it. Okay. Everybody get that?
Yeah.
All right, so I need a motion to approve this latest resolution.
Also move.
Mr. Stover? Mr.
I'll
Finkel?
second.
Mr. Stover, Mr. Finkel.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Confused? So moved.
I think the next one is mine.
All right, so that's that. The resolution to engage Bryant Ravino for bond counsel.
So this is the bond counsel that the board authorized
Right.
me to engage. They've been doing a lot of preliminary work. The reason why we had not gotten a contract done is that they needed to do some of the preliminary work to determine what their not to exceed was going to be, because the not to exceed has everything to do with the
Final amount.
two bonds in question. One is going to be a capital bond. One is going to be the bond that's going to deal with any potential refunds. And serial bonds are priced based on the ceiling or not to exceed price. And also, I think particularly on the resolution for the refunds, there was probably, there was a lot more research involved in that. And they're certainly not through it, but, so they're not to exceed for this, which is on page, it's a back-to-back document, so it's on number 8, compensation. In consideration for the services, they're going to handle the capital project bond offering in an amount not to exceed $1.5 million, and a settlement bond offering in an amount not to exceed $2.5 million. That total together keeps us under a limit that would require a lot of other stuff. So we deliberately kept it under that level. And then we will pay the contractor a not to exceed amount of $75,000 and any appropriate out-of-pocket expenses, which I don't believe will be any, because this will generally be dealt with over the phone. They're not going to be making trips here or us down there. They're
Okay.
out of New York City.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically in a nutshell the bond counsel contract.
Refresh my memory. What's the capital project?
That would be for the ice
Ice
bonding.
Yeah.
Bonding for the warning sirens.
Okay. All right. And the settlement, I assume, is
Settlement is it's a
just in case?
That's still out there.
Right.
And again, this is even the bonds. If we don't need to bond $2.5 million for refunds, we're not going to bond.
No.
But we had to come up with a number.
Okay. All right, so any questions?
No.
Any questions?
And to date, they have been extremely thorough. They have, yes, they have.
Well,
I've
yeah.
been very impressed by them.
I mean, I guess one of those was taxable, wasn't it? Wasn't that one? of the
Correct.
questions?
Right. The capital bond. The capital bond would not be tax free.
Okay.
The other one would.
All right. So I need a motion to approve the resolution to engage Bryant Ravino as bond counsel.
So moved.
All right.
Mr. Hayes?
Second.
Mr. Stover's turn is next. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So moved. Thank you.
And they are, just to mention that they are a MWBE firm.
Really?
Yes.
All right.
And actually, we had reached out to the MWBE folks to give us some firms that we might potentially engage, and to no surprise, we got one firm, which is better than 0 firms, which has been our track record to date, so
We try, though.
we do.
Okay. Let's see. Mr. Clark.
Mr. Chairman, thank
You're
you. Before the board, now there is a draft of a resolution to Authorize the satisfaction of the judgment in the Albany Engineering versus the Hudson River Black River Regulating District. As I'm sure everyone recalls clearly, November 28th, 2008, United States Court of Appeals decision in the matter of Albany Engineering versus Burke. Their complaint alleged that assessments levied pursuant to Environmental Conservation Law, Article 15, Title 21, those assessments levied against the AEC between 2003, 2000, and 2007 lacked statutory authority. AEC in that suit maintained that the reliance on such state statutory authority, the regulating district had improperly collected $516,655.62, and as a result, AEC, Albany Engineering, sought that amount plus interest, attorney's fees, costs, and disbursements to be returned. We, the regulating district, solicited and secured representation from the New York State Attorney General's office in defense of this claim. On April 2nd, 2002, the Albany County Supreme Court Justice Teresi entered a judgment against the regulating district for that principal amount of $516,655.62, or it's 62 cents, with interest. And interest is noted from January 1, 2003. AG's office argued unsuccessfully a motion to reconsider the Supreme Court's calculation of interest, and then appealed the Teresi judgment to the Appellate Division, 3rd Department. That decision just came back here last month on the 17th, I think it was. It was the 17th of October. The Appellate Division, 3rd Department declined to consider defenses raised by the AG's office, but did agree that the Teresi judgment should be modified without costs and remitted back to the Supreme Court to determine the regulating district's entitlement to an offset of the amount owed to Albany Engineering based on the outcome of the final for headwaters benefit determination. The AG's office has advised us that further appeal, an appeal of the Appellate Division, 3rd Department's ruling is any success is very unlikely.
Doesn't sound like
And based on that advice, our General Counsel and myself have entered into discussions with AEC to essentially negotiate what the settlement amounts got to be, and that is.
Is there any movement on either side, or a little bit? Good.
Well, there was a fair amount of back and forth in terms of when payments were actually made, and the interest, and also discussion in particular of what headwater benefits would be deducted from that amount, and what amounts would still remain to be paid. Bottom line is, and you'll see in the resolution also that bottom line is that $841,374.46 is an amount which, if we pay by close of business Friday the 15th, it would satisfy EEC's claim. We have also agreed that should the regulating district be unable to secure the necessary authorization from the board and approval of this disbursement by OSC, State Comptroller's Office, and thereby setting back the delivery time, that we would then submit an additional settlement check with the additional number of days paid out. That amount was calculated to be $207.46 per diem. If for whatever reason they don't get a check, we don't have it signed, sealed, and delivered to them on Friday. Bottom line is once this has been paid, they've received it, the judgment's been satisfied, AEC will provide us, the regulating district, with a satisfaction of judgment, which they'll file with the Supreme Court in Albany to close out the claim.
Okay. This isn't going to affect any of the other refund
Well,
claims.
there's three suits that we really were worried about. Albany Engineering suit, which this
This one.
satisfaction settles.
And we kind of expected this, Hayes.
Yeah,
It's not a big surprise.
not a big surprise. There's also a suit by Boralex and another suit by New York State Gas and Electric. The arguments that the Attorney General put together for our submissions on the AEC appeal also informed our initial replies, our initial answer in the Boralex and the NYSEG case, or cases. So we anticipate that the court, the appellate court, will hear those arguments when the Boralex and the NYSEG cases get to the appellate division. So while those numbers are bigger, we fully expect that our arguments, which are good ones, will be heard by the appellate court and that they will change the outcome with regard to those two cases. Doesn't do us any good with Albany Engineering.
Yeah.
If you hear Mr. Bisha from Albany Engineering speak of it, he basically takes the position that he is the one that brought the initial case against FERC. He's the one that pursued that case up through the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit. He's the one that pushed through negotiations and then finally a headwater benefit determination by FERC. He's the one that then pursued the matter initially in Albany County Supreme Court. He's the one that brought it first to the appellate division, and the hell with the rest of them. They're riding on my coattails and don't deserve a dime.
That's about right.
So,
It's all right by me.
and we kind of get that.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I don't think the decision for us to no longer be able to use the state law to assess FERC licensed hydropowers is wrong. The caveat that it does not apply to non-FERC licensed non-hydropowers. We can still assess those. NIMO, for instance. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, pretty much. So the other ones are still pending and are separate.
Yes.
In this. And just one more, if I read it right, the reason why it was sent back down and refused was because we didn't argue these points originally.
Right. We one of our strongest arguments was the statute of limitations claim or defense, which we put into
The appeal.
our answer, but we didn't argue in the court below.
Okay.
It was a
That's what
it's a standard tactic to put in a litany of affirmative defenses,
Right.
and we did that. Sometimes the courts will allow you to pursue those on appeal, and sometimes they don't. This particular case, I don't think we're a terribly sympathetic litigant, and the appellate court was not interested. There were four judges on the appellate division panel. As we listened to the argument, we were pretty convinced that if one of two judges who spoke up ended up writing the decision, that we had a pretty good shot, and if the other one wrote the decision, we didn't have a very good shot. And,
Probably don't need more than one guess as to who wrote the decision.
right,
Now, those arguments were made in the other two matters.
yes.
Oh, I thought you
No, I don't understand this. Okay. Yeah, that answers it.
The only other thing I wanted to point out, Mr. Chairman, is that sum amount, the $841,374, does take into account, as I had said before, the FERC Headwater benefits charges from
Are
2000.
they deducted from that, or are we
They're
going to deduct
deducted,
those later?
and again, that's up through 03, 04, 04, 05, 5, 6, 6, 7, and 7, 8 are deducted from that. But what that does not recognize is from that point forward, going to
Right.
present, the annual Headwater benefit assessment against Albany Engineering is and will be for the until such time that there's a new study done. $7,857, $78.57 annually, which means that we'll have to see from FERC right now, as of present, $39,285.
So we can actually tell FERC to start collecting some
Now,
money?
I realize it's a drop in the bucket compared to
Yeah.
the former amounts, but nevertheless, we will then pursue that with FERC.
Every mile starts with the first step.
So that, all this being said, it's our recommendation, it's my recommendation that the board pass this resolution and
Okay.
settle with Albany Engineering Corp.
All righty. I will ask Mr. Ferrera, the money's been appropriated, or?
The reason why we're, from a cash flow standpoint, able to absorb that kind of payment is because there was around $1 million of capital miscellaneous, some specifically identified projects in the cash flow that are now going to be bonded.
Okay.
So the 841 basically took that around $1 million away. But we still can do those projects because we're going to bond them. But at the end of the day, it also gives us no real wiggle room. I mean,
Right.
meaning anything else that's of a substantial nature, capital or what have you, is going to require continued bonding. And I'm not sure, until we get through the first capital bond, we don't know exactly how that's going to work. So I've been given assurances, and I'll mention this in my report, about
Okay.
the underwriting and so forth. So I'm confident. They're confident, I'm confident.
Because
It's just going to cost you.
we're about to write a big check, and we're not positive that that we have the bond.
I would again, I think it's just a matter of not whether or not we can bond. It's going to be the cost of money for us. Which is why we wanted to, and again, that's why you get underwriters early in the game and the fiscal advisor early in the game, because they'll come up with some of the flexibility, and they can be creative in how you do these bonds.
Okay.
So you can have a couple of series. There's a number of ways to make the thing, especially when you're talking about part of it's tax-free, part of it isn't. So if you can kind of combine them and make them more enticing.
Good. Any other questions? I'm running out.
As long as we got the funds there.
It's going to hurt. All right, so we need to pass a resolution to authorize satisfaction of judgment in the AEC versus River District. Mr. Stover,
Mr. Stover?
second?
The second that.
Second, Mr. Hayes.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Send them the check.
We will
Keep our fingers crossed.
sign that check forthwith and get it down to OSC, and
That's the check.
that's the check.
And on its way to OSC today.
It will be
Can we send it to them in $1 bills?
Pennies.
Interesting.
We still have the dump truck, right?
Yeah.
Yes, we do. So you send them pennies.
I will not be going back to the office, so I
I don't know, get cranky.
Mr. Fultano.
I don't think I'll leave this. I think it's
So Cheryl, the big check is right on. The big one's on top.
All right. Now that we've waded through that, Mr. Leslie, your report?
My report is on page 21. As we just went through, on September 13th, the AG's office participated in the oral argument. We lost. We've decided to settle. And as we also discussed briefly, the impact on Borlex and NYSEG. And I also continue to work on the amicus brief to the Appellate Division 4th Department with regard to Niagara Mohawk's suit to vacate a default that they took on a foreclosure action that Lewis County took for NIMO's failure to pay our assessment. That's just about done, ready to be circulated around staff for their comments. My board report itself on page 21 notes no FOIA requests. Between writing that report and this meeting, we've gotten 2. No appeals on either. And I think I forgot to mention that I had gone to the New York State Bar Association Environmental Law Section meeting where I picked up a little bit of CLE and showed the colors of the district. Other than that, any questions? CLE being continuing legal ed credits.
Yeah, mine's continuing medical. Mine's continuing medical ed all the time.
Well, I did that too, but that doesn't pertain to this.
No, I don't have any questions.
They have none.
Thanks, Beverly. Mr. Farrar?
Mr. Chairman, my report is on page 22 and ends with, maybe we can start with approval of the expenses, which is on page 69. These are travel expenses for the chairman in the amount of $370.64, and we need a motion and a second to execute
Yeah.
that disbursement.
Need a motion?
To make that motion.
Mr. Hayes.
Check. Mr. Stover?
Mr. Stover.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So my summary highlight is on page 22. As we just discussed, board just now authorized the check to go to AEC for $841,000. Fairly significant disbursement. We also paid our school taxes, $1,021,877, and that covered the 2013-2014. They've been processed and paid. So $2 million.
We paid them.
We're paying.
Yeah.
Paying our bills.
And those were Fulton counties,
Correct. Saratoga is still the offset.
Right.
Right. They do not pay their assessment. It offsets against the past due taxes, which we're calculating and
Eventually we'll.
paring down as we go, and with the balloons lump sum at the end of the budget cycle.
Okay.
The reason we were able to make these 2 payments is because on the revenue side, we've received all of our assessments from the other county. So we are up to date on our assessments, up to date on certainly our most important and largest disbursement, the school taxes. And how does that affect our cash flow? Don't look at these 2 reports because they don't incorporate the check we just signed.
Yeah.
Based on that disbursement, with no other revenue source or change, we would have cash flow disruption beginning at the end of our cycle. That would be June 2015, which is at the exact same time that balloon payment for the past due taxes would be due Saratoga. find the timing interesting, but strategic also. Now, we still don't know how the refund, and we believe, and we didn't talk about the timing, but we talked about when those cases might get beyond appeal, and
So
there may be whatever, and that I think is a year down the road. So we're not.
So we
So I
can't-
haven't factored that in.
We can't worry about it right now because we don't know what the results are. Anyway.
Right, but it's a cash. It's not a cash shortfall.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a period of time starting in June, based on the payments we just made, that based on how our disbursements go out, and we are very static in both the way we receive revenue and disperse money, there would be times where we wouldn't be able to pay the taxes because of the way the revenue and disbursements went out. But if we could adjust some of the revenue that we receive, the state share, not more state share, but when the
Right.
amount that we receive or some part of it, then we could actually get beyond this disruption and be back in a positive cash
Okay.
flow. And that number right now is around, it's probably less than 300,000 because we're factoring in the maybe greater likelihood that we get the past due FERC fees from AEC.
And that's not March of 2015, or 2014, it's March of 2015.
The
The end of our cycle,
Well,
or when the balloon payments due, or what.
No, the
June.
balloon is June 2015.
So
Right.
19 months out.
Yeah, so we've got,
So it's really the next year.
Right.
we've had bigger guns held to our heads.
In any event, the bottom line is, if the state will, or the counties will shift their payment to us a little bit,
Oh, okay.
we could get beyond it. Now, I don't know how soon we should be working on that, but
Sooner the better, I think.
I'm certainly going to put some cash flow numbers together and see exactly, who we could cajole and what the strategy and, tactical approach to that might be. I mean, the state one seems like, but again, the state, it's the way they're, the way they do that, I'm not sure that they could pay us any earlier than when they appropriate, they got an appropriation
yeah.
thing they go through, and, to say, can we appropriate more of that earlier? And
This
it would
past
be,
year is all we have to go on. I mean, we received
it was
the
May,
amount chargeable to the state.
right, in May, right,
Very shortly after the budget was passed.
Right,
I mean, it
right.
was weeks.
right.
So there are a lot of factors before we run into that.
There are.
Could
I mean, we got,
affect
again, I mean,
Okay.
it's only,
I mean, this year was May 1st, right? Right around the beginning of May?
right, correct. It
So-
seems like a lot of time. But there's so few things that we really have, that we can really look at, and our options are what they are.
Only a few
And
variables.
again, the wild card being the refunds, and at this point, we're just gonna hope we prevail as best as we can prevail and not have to go down the serial bond for a refund, because at the end of the day, back to the underwriters.
Right.
The update in my report for underwriting, we have underwriters now, it's Roosevelt and Cross. They attempted to do the initial underwriting for the tax anticipation note that was going to try to get us through the lack of revenue days. And they've already started looking at the capital project side, but they're looking at both. And right now, there is a myriad of ways that they can put this thing together to make it work. What I'm concerned about is the one that is tax-free, the refund. What I'm getting from bond counsel is that the amortization for that can't be, they're saying 5 years at a maximum. It could be less than 5 years. So if there's a really big number there, that'll be another cash flow issue we'd have to deal with at
Big
that
one.
time. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's a year down the road, but we have to figure out exactly what that amortization could be. And I'm not accepting 5 years, 3 years, or 4 years. I'm still looking for them to come up with a way that it's somewhere like 10 years.
Yeah.
So they're looking into that, and so we can do all that. We don't have to have a claim against us for them to proceed and determine exactly what's the best they can do. But right now, that's what you're telling me.
So a lot of it will revolve around the refund issue.
Sure. And again, as long as it's not the worst case scenario, I think even at a 5 or 3 year, we'll be able to do a bond and it'll fit into the cash flow situation we're in.
Okay.
But if it's some of the big numbers we've seen, then we'll need a plan B. So. But right now, I mean,
We've been working
The
on
fact that
plans
this-
C's, D's, and E's for years.
the fact that we could go 841,000 and still be able to get through a period of time where there's disruption.
Right.
And the other way to look at this, and the disruption is caused by the lack of revenue, but it's primarily caused by the fact that we have to pay taxes, blah, blah, blah. We may look at the other side of the equation. I'd hate to do that, but I mean, I have to consider all options. We may not pay you in January, we pay you in February.
Right.
There's things that we can do to get through that period. So.
Oh, I think, yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. All right.
And I think that was all I wanted to highlight on my report. If the board has any more questions,
No, I didn't see.
I'm available.
Questions?
Nope.
Thank you. Mr. Fulton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report begins on page 70. October was another drier month. We had about 70%, 72% of historic average precip coming into Great Sacandaga Lake watershed. It's measured at Conklinville, and only about 41% of our historic average inflow for the month of October at Great Sacandaga Lake. Stillwater is at a little bit better at just about 100% of precip, and although our inflow was about 58% of historic average, since that end of that month, we've received more closer to historic precip, and our reservoirs have, as compared to what's shown in the graphs that were supplied to you for the month of October, we've recovered a little bit in a few cases. Indian Lake, Old Forge, Six Lake, they're all right at our target for this time of year. Stillwater, which was down a couple of feet at the end of October, is now only about a foot below our target elevation. And Great Sacandaga Lake is actually, it was as high as a couple of feet over target. We had the inflow of upwards of 7,500 CFS, which we haven't seen since, for a one-day average since April. And so we're now about a foot and a quarter above target elevation at Great Sacandaga Lake. Not an awful lot of news on our projects, although I'll just mention a couple of them that are ongoing. I'll mention those briefly. We continue our Old Forge Six Lake engineering assessment. That's being completed by CDM Smith. They're drafting their engineering assessment report, as well as the safety inspection. Both those will come together hopefully in the next month or so. At Hawkinsville, our consultant Kleinschmidt Associates is in the process of assessing wetlands and natural resources in order to develop their report for the removal and remediation study. And engineering staff's in the process of reviewing the Indian Lake engineering assessment statement of qualifications from 16 engineering firms who are vying for the job.
Oh, okay.
And,
Wow.
So we have.
He's looking at me, Mr. Chairman, because I'm.
Well,
not
you
quite
and I
sure.
and Mr. Mosier are all working in between all the other activities, squeezing in the
Leaf
review
Lake.
of those 16 submissions that we received. That's actually, I think, the most we've received
I don't
for a
remember,
project.
remember ever seeing any that
Yeah,
mess.
that's so firms are, I guess, interested in a little winter work. I don't know, but in any event, we're working our way through those, and I think we hope to have the evaluation summary as well as a recommendation for the December meeting.
Okay.
Is there any questions? I'd be glad to answer them. Otherwise, that concludes my report.
One of the town councilman in Old Forge got a hold of me and asked me if the water was a little high in the Fulton chain. And I looked on the graph and it showed it when I went online.
I mean, it might, we might have been, well, we're always a little bit higher than the target because we hold out until that third
Okay.
weekend in October.
Right. Oh, all
when
right.
when we pulled down pretty quickly. I mean, right now, Old Forge is right at the target.
Okay.
Sixth Lake
I haven't
is
pulled it up lately.
0.05 of a foot off a target.
I
And we
can-
were a little bit above both of those because we do wait until the Moose River Festival at both locations. And, if it weren't for that festival, we would start maybe a week or two earlier. But the quick draw out of Old Forge brings it right down within a couple of weeks almost to target. And thus where we are right now is
Yeah, I
right
noticed
at
the
target.
river was a little high.
Compared to
for-
target, might be a little bit high. Certainly, the target is actually slightly higher than for the first half of the drawdown after the summer season. The target is a little bit higher than historic. Historically, Sixth Lake and Old Forge both were drawn down beginning in the middle of September, and so we don't really cross that point until about mid-November, and then
Right.
our drawdown is a little bit lower than historic average for a period of time from December through the refill in March. So it depends on when you look at it, but it,
I forgot about the Canoe Fest. there.
yeah, that drives us out till, and you can see it in the graph how we're a good foot above the target and almost 2 feet above the historic at Sixth Lake, and about a foot higher at Old Forge when we begin to draw down at the third week of October.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Mr. Hudson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report starts on page 104. Hudson River area and Black River area, give you a quick update that everything's running very smooth. And I'd like to express my appreciation to staff in both areas for their help in this time of change for both areas. And, but everything's going real good. We started our annual access permit renewal process at SFO. So we printed out over 4,700 the renewals. At this time, they're being stuffed in the envelopes, and we're getting ready for mailing.
Are they all printed and mailed? We don't do any online?
No, we buy the forms. It's a
Okay.
two-part form. Goes through a processor, prints them all out, and we stuff the envelopes and send them out.
Still with a dot matrix printer.
Really?
Yeah, that was
I
fun.
guess it seems odd to me these days.
Well, that's driven by the three-part form.
Well, and we've gone to a two-part form now, but it was a three-part at one time. We got down to a two-part, and we eliminated one mailing on that, so we saved a few dollars without having to do that second mailing. It seems to have worked out good last year, so.
Okay.
Myself, the executive director, chief engineer, and general counsel, last month, we visited a number of the Black Area river beneficiary sites, took a little tour of a good portion of those to familiarize ourselves with their location And let's see, staff at the Black River Field Office has completed the riprap work on the south dike of Stillwater Dam. That was a project that was going on last month during your visit to the power plant. That job is completed, and I'll give you some before and after photos, hopefully at the next board meeting you can take a look
Okay.
at. But that's all I have. I'll be glad to answer any questions anybody may have.
I don't have anything right now.
Good job, good job.
Very nice. And thank God it's slow, kind of like the meetings here right now.
Yes.
Makes life easier. Okay. Any other board questions? Has there been any movement on addressing the two area administrators' position?
Mr. Chairman, I'm still working on that. It's something that we need to bring to a head soon.
Why don't I, how about,
Mr. Hodgson's still doing the work.
that's why I brought
Of
it up.
both, and
We're going to have to address it one of these days.
in addition, you know, there's been addition, as we've noted in the past, Mr. Ferrara has also picked up additional work because of our current method for staffing that.
Right.
It's in a state of flux. Neither of them are being compensated presently, and we need to.
How about
we need a permanent fix at this point. And
put some recommendations together for either
I hope
December
to-
or January?
I hope to bring something to you next month
Okay.
to
Why don't we-
resolve this on a more permanent, or on a permanent basis.
Yeah. Give us some options. See what we got. Any other questions?
No.
So I need a resolution for the next board meeting in Watertown in December? Or a
Vote
motion?
against that? No.
10th, Mr. Chairman?
Is it the 10th of December?
Yes.
I believe so.
That's what we have tentatively.
Mr. Stover? Second?
Second.
Mr. Hayes? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Anything else? Motion for adjournment?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. And it's a wrap.